that.
There
There
you
it
go. You
goes.
got it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kate.
All right. Shelley, do we have any other public comment or any written public comment?
Mayor, I have no written comment, and I don't see any other hands at this point.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to the consent calendar. City Manager Treppa.
Yes, thank you very much. We have a few items on the consent calendar. Item A are the minutes from the regular meeting of October 19th. Item B is resolution number 2021-74, renewing the authorization and making findings and determinations under AB 361 to continue our Zoom council meetings. Item C is resolution 2021-73, recognizing November as Native American Heritage Month. Item D is resolution number 2021-75, authorizing the city manager to execute 2 agreements for on-call mapping services, one with Bennett Engineering Services and the other with ClearPath Land Evolvement. Each of those would be not to exceed $90,000 for a 3-year term. And I'd like to note that the majority of this work would be in support of development applications and would be paid for through developer deposits. Item E is resolution 2021-76, which is approving a construction contract with Ampol Electric for the installation of new pathway lighting at Blue Oak Park in the not to exceed amount of $53,395,000 and authorizing the city manager to approve change orders up to $5,000 should they be warranted. And those are the items on the consent calendar.
Okay, is there any council comments or concern on the consent calendar? Shelley, is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
I see no raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We'll entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I'll move the item, the consent calendar in its entirety.
Okay.
New will second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Lauren and a second by Councilmember New. Shelley, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Lauren,
Aye.
Councilmember New,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Biazzi,
Aye.
Mayor Cowan.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Okay, next is presentations, and as the city manager mentioned, I don't believe we have the video from Yoshi Dihi tribe. Is there anybody on the call from the tribe that would like to speak about Native American Heritage Month? I don't know if we have anybody or not. Shelley, do we have any hands waving?
Let me see, hold on. Okay, I don't see any hands waving. I see no hands. I see no people waving at me on the screen.
Okay, thank you. I think it was mentioned that they had a conflict with another meeting tonight, so that's why they weren't able to join us. Okay, we'll move on to El Rio Villas, public housing repositioning, and I believe this is going to be Sandra Segrist with Yolo Housing.
Thank you, Mayor Cowan and City Council. Thank you for having me this evening. I think the slides are coming up. So I'll do a little introduction while those are loading. My name is Sandra Segrist. I'm the interim executive director at Yolo County Housing Authority. And although this particular property is not technically in the city of Winters, you may all be familiar with it. It sits just on the other side of the highway, and the community is highly aligned with Winters, has employment. Many of the individuals who live there have employment in Winters, have family and friends in Winters, children go to school in Winters. So this process that we are initiating across the next few years, and in particular in the next year, to sort it through with the community, I wanted to make sure the council's apprised and that you're aware of it ahead of the community in case members come forward to want to know who to contact and what's happening with it. So did we?
Small glitch
I
here.
believe we're working on loading the PowerPoint presentation. There we go.
Okay.
Awesome.
And if you can start the slideshow, there we go.
It's a lot more interesting than just hearing me talk. So I'm really glad the slides can. Yeah. So we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to give a little bit of a point of reference to housing authorities and the primary functions of what we do so that this is in some context. There is both public housing and then what folks are much more familiar with, which are housing choice vouchers. You typically hear them called Section 8, which is the regulations behind them. There are many types of vouchers. So Section 8 is just fine to call them that. But what is happening today is the housing authority, like many housing authorities around the country, is looking to what's called reposition the public housing side of the house to the voucher side of the house. And when I say house, I literally mean the federal funding buckets. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight, the background for that. But at the heart of it, why are we doing this? Why now? That's a lot of what I want to cover as well. But the big overarching reason for HUD working with communities around the country on this repositioning is to deal with really, really hefty backlog of maintenance that has accrued over many decades. And while the national picture of that is around $40 billion, and growing at 3% a year is the estimate, the Yolo County share of deferred maintenance, meaning items we just don't have funding from the federal government to repair in our public housing, is in excess of $20 million. Okay, next slide. So a little bit about how we fell into this pickle in the first place by history. Public housing's been around since the 30s. It was really a great idea in the beginning, but very quickly became evident, probably in the first decade or so, that the communities, because they were low income, designed for low income families, they became set aside neighborhoods rather than built and integrated into communities more fully. And they, by the end again of this first decade, began to notice there wasn't enough dollars for effectively maintaining them. As HUD worked on this over the next couple decades, they then came up with this federal program known as the Vouchers, or Section 8, and that launched formally in 1974. I said earlier that there are many, many types of vouchers. You may have heard of some of them, like there's veterans vouchers. Right now, there's vouchers known as emergency housing vouchers that were issued because of COVID. But at the heart of it, there are two types of vouchers. One is what's known as tenant-based or portable. So if you have one of those, I've heard people refer to them as the golden ticket. If I hold a Section 8 voucher, I can live in Section 8 housing anywhere in the country. That tenant-based voucher follows me as the tenant. The other broad category of vouchers are known as project-based, and those stay at a development or a location. And if I leave that unit, the voucher doesn't come with me. The next person who comes in who obtains a project-based voucher gets that unit. So those are the difference in the types of these vouchers you'll hear about. So what the vouchers do is allow for a different kind of income from HUD. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But in 2012, so this has been rolling along, right? They started the public housing. Several decades later, they came up with the vouchers. And then they recognized as this deferred maintenance problem is occurring, that they needed other strategies. And so they launched in 2012 what's known as a rental assistance demonstration. For those of you in housing background, it was called RAD. It's still called RAD. And in this county in particular, I've been at the Housing Authority for a little over a year, and around, I think in 2018 or so, this Housing Authority was working with HUD on the idea of RAD for repositioning. And like a lot of housing authorities this size in these communities, we aren't big enough in some ways for RAD to pencil. It just wasn't going to be a great strategy. And so when I came to the Housing Authority, it was just on hold. And I think probably on the second day I was there, they called and said, okay, let's talk about repositioning. And I said something bright, like, what is repositioning? And so we moved from there. So next slide. This is kind of the advantages, but what I want to say here really gets at the very last box about ability and leverage and why that is. When we talk about the tenants who are either in public housing or who have a voucher, for them, it's the same financial input or burden out of their income to their rent. It's 30% of their income. So why are vouchers working out better than the public housing side of the house? Vouchers are driven on fair market rent. So if I'm a landlord and I have a voucher tenant and fair market rent is $1,000, the tenant's going to pay 30% of their income towards that $1,000. HUD is going to make up the difference. So I, as the landlord, have a predictable funding amount coming in every month. I know I'm going to get paid at least the HUD portion. It's a very manageable model. The way the public housing is structured, if I'm the tenant, I pay 30% of my income to the Housing Authority, and the rest of the assumed income for the Housing Authority is in an annual allocation known as a capital fund, and then there's an operations fund as well. But the dilemma is, if the tenant's income drops to zero, we may have a base of $25 that somebody has to pay, but there's no difference made up. Your capital fund's your capital fund, and it's an allocation. There's no flexibility with it, and the capital needs of all of the properties are more than that capital fund. So shifting to the voucher side of the house is a game changer in many, many ways. It will allow this Housing Authority, like many who have been in this process, to appropriately and effectively maintain their properties. It will improve the housing for the tenants considerably. Okay, next slide. So this is a very pretty picture from HUD that has a lot to it, but at the heart of it, that RAD I talked about, that rental assistance demonstration strategy that doesn't pencil for a jurisdiction our size, is that green circle. And what I put the little red box around are the two strategies to the side of that we are going to pursue with our Housing Authority. Which strategy and the combination of that will vary at each of our locations, but one of them is known as Section 18, and one of them is known as Streamlined Voluntary. On the other side of both of those processes that I'm going to talk a little bit about, you end up with the two boxes at the bottom. People either have a tenant-based voucher or a project-based voucher. Next slide. I realized too that it might be helpful to say, of our 431 public housing units in Yolo County, 124 of them, which is the total units here at the bottom of this slide, are at El Rio Villas. We are in 5 other communities, including Woodland and West Sacramento. So Winters, Woodland, and West Sac are our largest developments. And then we have smaller developments in Esparto, Knights Landing, and Yolo. So repositioning is not specific to this property that I keep saying is in Winners, but I understand it's not. It's on the other side, but it's aligned with Winners, so we call it Winners. But I want to be clear that this repositioning is all of the public housing. We are moving over these years that I'm going to talk about from, again, one bucket of funding over to everything being voucher properties. So what I like about this, even though it's just a grid and a bunch of numbers, is if you look at the top, this is what tells the story. This development was put together across 4 very spread out decades. As you probably will not be surprised to learn, 1 and 2, the first built in the 50s and the second built in the 60s, are the 2 that need the most support. They have, like all buildings and all properties, needed a lot more repair and maintenance in more recent years. And this repositioning is ideal for those 2 properties. And the other numbers are just the numbers of units and how they meet the criteria for each of the strategies. So next slide. So how do we get from where we are to where we need to go? It's truly a community conversation and also individual family conversations. What I have here are the super high level example descriptions of how it could play out. So one example is we rehabilitate the units that are in 1 and 2, and residents relocate into the what I call the shiny new units. I will say that across each of these 6 locations, one of the things that's impacting the strategy choices is whether there's vacant land. So at El Rio, there is a little bit of vacant land. And what that means is we could put up something new and move individuals there and take things down sort of in pieces. But there's not a lot of land. There's a lot of land, but on the property itself, there's not a lot of open space for development. So the idea in redeveloping is that people only move one time. That's ideal. You build something new and you say, here's a great new place. Here's where, if you want your voucher and you want to be here, here's this other option for you. We have to, that's a part of the community input process in Winners. We have to figure this out with the community, whether we build and do that or these other strategies. So the second option on here says we rehabilitate some units and bring in new amenities and new uses, and some tenants relocate. What we mean by new amenities and new uses is it could be anything. The community may say we'd like a park and less density. We'd like business. We'd like services. It literally is wide open on the property. And the third choice is, which happens sometimes at developments, the community says, well, if you're going to remove some of these units, you have to rebuild. Let's take them offline altogether. Some people may not want to stay on the property. Some people can move out of state with their vouchers, they have family somewhere, they want to be elsewhere. And literally the open space becomes the conversation. Like instead of housing, what else would go there? So it really is this open conversation. I put at the bottom 3 and 4, which do not need that level of redevelopment. Those will go through that second strategy, which is the streamlined voluntary. It's just a fancy name basically for you go right to vouchers. But in that process, there's a lot of, again, communication and choice for the involved residents. Okay, next slide. So what does this look like? I am putting this out to be really clear that I'm big on the phrase, nothing about us without us. I think that it isn't a useful idea to come into a community and say, we need to rip these down and here's where you can go and blah, blah, blah. So that actually is a choice in some of the redevelopment with HUD's model. And my focus here and in each of our communities is to do this timeline that you can see here starts with the community input processes. And we have, again, a bunch of materials from HUD about how we can do this, but it really is to have that conversation about here's the good news on the other end of this process. How do we want to get there, and what do you think it should look like on the other side? And you know, all communities are diverse. I'm sure there'll be a lot of views and opinions. And I think that process can be super productive. The second phase really becomes your resident specific plans. So if some people need to be relocated during a rebuild and then relocated back, for instance, just to be clear, in this process, the housing authority funds all of that. We don't, and that's a part of the model with HUD. And again, so the tenants, the idea is to be as have the most stability, the least disruption possible, and the most clarity, as clear as it can get in complex development. And then in year 3, which will be 2024, we'll start the process of the redevelopment, and then do it through 25 and 26. So it's really for winters, I think, this 4-year process from start to finish. Okay, next slide. This has a bunch of stuff on it, but I like it because I saw it in a presentation and HUD uses it. And I just want to point out that it's kind of ending with all the complexity. Procuring and construction and all this, the regulatory processes and engineering and architecture and all of that, all the funding, all the matrices that actually get a building ready for move-in are what most of this slide really talks about. But if you look at the left, strategic planning and resident engagement, those are the pieces that make all the rest of it possible. Having a good, clear vision, working with the community, having those conversations, making sure that your end result is a target you're pointing towards, that you really do want to end up there, helps all the other complexity stuff find its place in the layering. Okay, next slide. That is the high level overview. I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Sandra. I will say that I think, you mentioned in the beginning about their El Rio Villa is not technically within the city limits, but I can assure you that pretty much everybody in Winters thinks of El Rio Villa as part of Winters for sure. And I think it always has been. Is there anybody on the council that has questions or comments?
Mayor?
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra, for that presentation. It looks like a very lofty goal to go through all this, and I could understand there being a lot of deferred maintenance needing to be done on those older units, definitely. Yeah, and like the mayor said, I know a lot of the people that live out there, I think even the people out there are considered as Winters residents, even though they don't live in town. So if there is relocation to be done with those residents, if we determine that it's best to rehab those units, if to move the people out and move them back in, it would be, I think, difficult to find them housing locally because there's so few local housing units available. So where would you relocate them to? They would be out of town somewhere temporarily?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I want to be clear that a part of a process in development taking this long is a good thing in that there's a natural attrition. So various people move out at times, and also the number of units that we need to take offline is for sure 29, I think it is. I have to look back at that slide, and then up to the full 2 buildings. So it's this complicated math puzzle, and really why it starts with the tenant conversations. We have individuals, for instance, who live in Winters who like this last year, we moved a family to Woodland because they have other people they wanted to be closer to over there. So it's not just that we're gonna say, oh, 56 families need to come across the highway and we need some apartment building and stuff for you. It's not that. And also it can be phased. And if you know the length of time that a unit will be offline, that process can be timed out and shorter term. So it doesn't have to be like a 4-year move, something like that.
Is it possible to bring in any kind of temporary housing units, like some, mobile units or something to have on the site so people could be relocated there
Yes,
while the renovations are done?
absolutely. I forgot to mention that. So this idea of there is some land there where ideally if there's land where you put on new units, you literally build while people are living where they're living today. They move into the new building and then you take their existing building offline, rebuild there and move somebody else into it, right? So it's sort of this domino on the property. And the other alternative is instead of building on the open space, you bring in temporary housing.
Yeah, okay.
For sure.
Well, whatever the decisions end up being, I think it's very important to get the residents' engagement, which I know you're planning to do. But even the city's engagement, because they are tied into the city's wastewater treatment plant out here. So all the planning that we do will be affected on what goes on out there as well. So look forward to hearing more details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember New.
I just want to remind the council that we're still working hard at getting the overpass on
505.
over 505. And we certainly want to see the units refilled with people, and because if we don't have the housing out there, we're not going to have any input from the federal government or the state government as far as money goes. So I mean, I think it's really important for the people, but I want to make sure that we just don't decide to up and move out. And I know that that's not in the package. I understand that, but we want to make it as convenient for Yolo housing as we possibly can, so that the state looks upon us with favor and the federal government does the same.
Councilmember Lauren.
I'm just trying to understand it all. So if, say for those 2 older buildings, they would be torn down, but the property itself would still be owned by the county, right?
So the property itself is owned by the housing authority.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing is once properties convert to vouchers, because the housing authority processes the vouchers, the housing authority technically in the long run isn't the owner of the buildings. So typically what housing authorities do is have an ancillary nonprofit that's aligned with the housing authority, but they become the landlord. And like an example is you see properties with a management company, it would look more like that. But the housing authority can continue to own the land or own the land in a partnership.
So the housing authority would continue to own the land. A nonprofit would run the new building. Who builds the buildings?
Well, that's a great question. So we are starting with a larger project in the city of Woodland, and an RFP for the developer will go out. We're targeting February, all things being equal, sometime in the spring. And then it will be a similar process for Winters. We'll put out an RFP for a developer when it gets closer to that. And then that developer sort of will manage all of that process. My thought is we'll have done a bunch of the visioning in advance of that, so that when we do the RFP for a developer, we know what we're asking them to do a little bit, or
Okay.
hopefully a lot.
Okay. Thanks for answering my question. And yeah, the people there in El Rio Villa are definitely, part of our lives and are great contributors to our community and the greater Yolo area. So we want to take care of them.
Awesome.
Thank you. Sandra, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand this right. So Yolo Housing Authority oversees all these properties. With this repositioning, does your structure basically stay the same? You're still overseeing all the properties and managing them, or does
Yes,
that change?
well, yes, we are involved no matter what. The issue is when you do this kind of redevelopment, you have different partners in the project. So for instance, the Housing Authority is a managing general partner, it's called, of an apartment complex in the city of Woodland. We contract out our management of that property to a property management company, John Stewart, who does that a lot. We chose to do that, the Housing Authority, before I was there, because they have that skill set, and we are doing some other things. A lot of other things. When we reposition and we're no longer overseeing the public housing side, we can take on the property management side in a more robust way. It really is up to that partnership that moves forward in the development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. The only other thing was just a curiosity thing. When you mentioned where all the different housing units are that are, managed by Yolo Housing, the only city in Yolo County I think you didn't mention was Davis. Is there a reason there's no Yolo Housing properties in Davis?
Well, public housing is what I was talking about, the 431 units of public housing. How all
Okay.
that got decided between 1950 and 1990 something, I'm not sure. What I can tell you is we do have properties in Davis that are for agricultural families. We actually own a house and 3 duplexes
Okay.
that have been there for several decades. And then, but the public housing, Davis has a different set of affordable housing throughout the city. But I'm not sure why public housing was never built there.
Okay. I was just curious.
That's a good question.
If there isn't any other council questions or comments, Shelley, do we have any hands raised or any written comment for this item? We're not hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I
Yes, we
don't
can.
see any hands waved, and I'm not seeing anybody waving at me on the screen.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing further, I'll just say thank you, Sandra. Very informative, and thanks for the update and the education on what's next. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to discussion items. And the first one is a discussion about the redistricting. Who's starting this off? Is it city manager?
Yeah, I'll start you off, and then we have a PowerPoint that was prepared of all the recent maps. So this item is on the agenda as a result of council's request at the last meeting. And what we've done is we have described the process that everybody goes through every 10 years following the decennial census to redraw the boundaries for districts for electing elected officials. And those boundaries need to include essentially equal population within whatever that jurisdictional unit is. And so at the county level, the redistricting process is being initially coordinated by an advisory commission that then reports to the Board of Supervisors. At the state and federal level, all of the districts are being redrawn, and that process is being coordinated by an independent redistricting commission. And so for the state Senate, the state Assembly, and for the California Congressional districts, that process is being coordinated by the state Redistricting Commission. And so we've provided in the staff report links to each of those websites so that people can look at the maps and submit their comments. We've also provided the deadline for comments. However, it's a rapidly moving target, and since the report was prepared, the proposed maps have changed twice now already. So what Elena has done, our executive assistant, is she prepared a PowerPoint yesterday of all the current maps, at least as they existed yesterday. And Shelley, I believe, has control of that PowerPoint, and she can bring those up. And the council can take a look at what the current boundaries are at the county, the state, and then the congressional level, and then what the proposed maps are as of at least yesterday. And I want to thank Elena for pulling this together because she's had to update it twice now. So this, whoops, thank you, Shelley. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is the current district map for the Board of Supervisors for Yolo County. And then there are a series of proposed maps. And Winters right now is in District 2. And then Shelley, do you want to scroll to the next one? So this is draft plan 1. Next one. Shelley?
It's already changed. This is plan 2.
Oh, it did? Oh, I'm sorry, draft plan 2. I can't hear Shelley. Her mic is a little low. Okay, here's 2. I didn't even notice a change. And then plan 3. This is plan 3. Then the next one is plan 4. And then I believe there's a 5th one now. Nope. So as of today, there's a link. Shelley, can you call up the last one? And it has a name now that got posted on the county website.
Okay.
And it was probably posted today. So there's a 5th map now that is for the county website.
Is that the El Concilio map?
Yep.
So I listened to the part of the meeting from the Redistricting Advisory Committee was held last night, and they narrowed it down to 3 maps to move forward to the supervisors.
And which were those 3?
That was map 2. And then there's one called map 4A, which isn't in this. Yeah, it should be on their website. There's a 4A. And then the third one was the El Concilio map.
So here's 4A.
That's 4A, yeah.
Yeah.
So 4A
So
is slightly different than 4, not much.
Is it the council's pleasure to take each one of these jurisdictional areas at a time? Or would you like to see all of them and then back into whichever jurisdictional area you're most interested in and take them in a different order?
Well, I think let's if it's all right with everybody else, I'd like to discuss the county maps first, and then we can get into the state maps, especially since they're being drawn up by 2 different groups anyway. Yeah. But you know, I was around 10 years ago when we got changed out of the old District 5, which was pretty much all the rural areas and Winters. And we fought to stay out of 2 just because it includes a good portion of Davis, and we felt it took away some of our ability for representation from Winters and for the rural area. So looking at the most recent maps that the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, I would be most in favor of map number 2, because it puts Winters back in the rural district 5. Because I just feel that Winters should be part of the most rural district personally. Other council comments?
Well,
Thoughts?
this is Councilman New, and I just
Yes.
want to make sure that if 5 is good, it's not that big, but when I looked at some of the maps earlier, the district that one of the maps that I saw had winters in with other cities practically to the Oregon border. And I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it went way far north. And I was worried if the population is the same, and even though the district is larger, it's getting harder and harder for a representative to cover that area. And I don't want the area to be so big that we never see our representative.
Right. And that's for the state assembly and Senate seats, I believe. So
And that could be true.
yeah,
That's
right
correct.
now we're just talking about Yolo County and the supervisor districts here is what I was referring to. And we were looking at first here was just the Yolo County districts.
Fair enough.
So,
Thank you. I
yeah.
appreciate that explanation.
Shelley,
No
would you
problem.
like to scroll through the 3 final plans that are being recommended, 2, 4A, and the last one, El Concilla, I think it's called. So this is 4A.
So this is 4A that's on the screen right now. 2, this is draft plan 2. And the El Concilio. So those are the 3 that I heard you wanted to see again.
Right. Well, if that's what it's narrowed down to. Yeah.
I have some comments on it that, so I was at the meeting last night also and stayed for the entire meeting and, was there for the vote and for the comments. And there was a presentation by Jesse Ortiz, who's the Concilio, about why they felt very strongly to keep the boundaries that 5 has now and to not have winners as part of those boundaries. And that, it would definitely, in his point of view, result in a lawsuit if the boundaries changed. And, I'm not carrying the message of the Concilio tonight, but I'm saying I just want to mention that there were some a lot of strong voices about why winners shouldn't be part of 5. And then there were definitely, people that voiced that they wanted to be part of a rural district and a more rural district, which 5 has. And then there was also comments on this map, the Concilio map and 4A have a different configuration for District 2. This one has more land to the, I'm going to say, looking at the map, to the north and to the west. So it has Positas, Golden Bear, and those kind of greater areas, and a wider area. So I don't have like a full. I feel like I can't really say what a letter should have in it for the districts, but I would just acknowledge that as far as like keeping our neighbors to the west, Golden Bear and Positas, I like the idea of them being included in whatever path forward we make. I think that was a good choice, not to have them kind of cut out the way they have been in this last map from this last time period. So I'm just not sure how, whatever the letter is, that if we want to put a letter forward, we should probably acknowledge that there was a pretty strong argument, a legal argument that was being made against keeping winners out. And so it might behoove us to have an opinion and to have then a second opinion, like a first place, second place.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Biazzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I feel very strongly that we should be in District 5 where we used to be until we were moved 10 years ago from District 5 into District 2. I think Winners, as we all know, is a rural farming community, and we have a lot more in common with the other towns in that proposed District 5 on the map plan 2, which we'd be in with Cape, Esparto, Madison, all the rural areas out there. And I think that would that would be beneficial to us. We'd have a stronger voice for the farming community as well as for our fire districts, our public safety, transportation, all these different areas. I think we would have better representation if we had a rural representative in where we would be in District 5. I don't think being a part of a district where we are lumped in with Davis, I don't know that we would get as good of representation as we would from a rural supervisor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember New, any thoughts on the county lines or the county possibilities?
No, I'm still thinking about what Bill was saying, and that makes good sense in some ways. I do think, though, that if we could work with Davis and there was something we wanted and we had their support, that would be good. But I know that, and I think that would be good because they seem to have good contact with Sacramento and the county, and for those reasons. But I hear what Bill is saying also, and I'm just pondering both those thoughts at this moment. That's it.
Okay. Councilmember Anderson, do you have any thoughts on the county redistricting?
I'm just wondering what the effect would be on that overpass that we were talking about with our last presentation. Would that, if we go too far west, will that have a negative impact on that choice as far as potential funding?
Well, I think both of the maps, maybe we could flash through all three again, but I think all three of them went, we'd be in a district that went to the other side of 505.
Yeah, I think all the maps,
Yeah.
the westernmost boundary is clear over at the westernmost boundary of the county. On
Yeah.
all three proposed maps.
Yeah.
Yeah, these.
They just, some of them, like map 4A and El Concilio, don't go as far north on one of those two.
Yep.
The Concilio may go a little bit farther north than.
Yeah.
Shelley, can you bring up 4A? That's 4. There it is.
4A, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a whole lot different than what we have now, except it goes a little further west, I believe.
I just want to say something about the comment on better representation. I think if you're looking at a boundary, you're looking at maybe a community that you feel is a community that is part of who you identify with. I think if you go down the road of we might have better representation, I think it's divisive. I think it's divisive to the future of however the map is drawn and whoever becomes the supervisor for this area. I think it's the wrong way to speak about it. I think it doesn't reflect the best of us as leaders. I think if you're gonna write a letter or have an opinion about identifying with the community, a land area, a water district, mutual concerns, then that's what we can voice. But I think if we say that we think we'd be represented better, I think it doesn't reflect to our better angels, so to speak. I think it's the wrong way to talk about it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't think it's, I don't think it's at all about the person. It's about the area to me. And to me, Winters is a more rural area just like Esparto and Cape and up that direction, which we used to be part of District 5, and it was considered the more rural district. And yeah, I think that's what it's about, is, you know, having half or whatever amount of Davis, which is more of a metropolitan, bigger city, you know. It's just, it's different. You know, Winters is a rural farming community, and I think being represented as part of a rural district is more beneficial to Winters. I don't think it has anything to do with an individual person, at least not to me.
I would just think that if this council decides to write a letter, that needs to be stated, because I
Yeah.
just think it would be offensive to say otherwise.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it wouldn't reflect well on us. And the other thing that, you know, I didn't plan to make any of these comments. I plan to not make any, but I just think that, you know, we don't want to poison the well towards the next, to whatever happens next. You know, we want to be state what our values are, and part of our values is also that you know, yes, we have wineries, and yes, we have Mariani Nut, but Mariani Nut is they're not farming, it's manufacturing and processing. A lot of the people that live here are they work in processing plants. They work out of the area. I would say that the residual identity of Winters is farming, but that the whole of Winters and the jobs for Winters, that's not really a majority farming now. And however we position ourselves, we have to position ourselves with a look to the future of who we want to be. Thank you.
So Mayor, just when I say represented better, what I mean by that is, it's, as you say, it's not the person, it's just, I think the needs of a community like Winters would fit in better with that rural district where we are lumped in with other rural areas. The representation for the rural needs are much different than, say, the needs of a community that like Davis. We have very different issues that we're dealing with. And when a supervisor comes in to represent that district, and I'm not saying that the supervisor we have is not representing us. I just think that we could be, our interests would be stronger if we have a voice that has the whole rural community in it. And that's just kind of however we want to phrase that. I'm fine, but I'm just thinking that that rural district would be a stronger voice for our community to fit into.
Okay. Is there any other council comments before we see if there's any public comments on the county districting? Shelley, do we have anybody that would like to speak to this item on the county portion of the redistricting? Don't.
Kate Lavish.
Okay. Welcome back, Kate.
Thank you, Mayor. Kate Ladish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And I want to thank council for discussing this issue, and then also getting into the state and federal ones. And one of the things that I brought to the County Redistricting Commission was the need to keep Winters, the greater Winters area, at least the Yolo County parts, together in one district rather than the way it currently is, split into two. And I'm pleased that all of the maps that that went to the county commission do that. That it includes the folks up in Golden Bear and Pesquita. It also includes El Rio Villa, and I think that's really important. And so with the maps where Winters would be in District 2, I'm not quite sure how far north some of those go. So for example, if both sides of County Road 29 are included, I think both of those, County Road 29, that's winters. And so that's something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. And I agree with the discussion about how to present it and how to think about it. And one of the ways to look at it is communities of interest. And so what is it we share, and functionally what's going on? And so certainly looking at, say, addressing wildfires is one of the things that's come up, and actually one of the reasons why I wanted all of Winters together in a district, is so that the rural parts of our community and incorporated could all be thinking about that together.
Thank you, Kate. And Kate, you did bring up a good question, and that is, maybe somebody on the meeting here knows, with these maps where we stay in District 2, do we know where that northern line is, which road that is? If it's 29, 26, 27, do we know where that is? Does the Mayor Pro Tem or Councilmember Lauren know from the meeting last night?
I actually don't know if it's on that, but I know that the Concilio map goes further north than the other map, all the way across its line.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not aware what road that goes to either.
I asked it during a county meeting, but I don't know.
Chief Lopez has his hand up. Maybe he can enlighten us.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, good evening. Kind of looking at some of the maps, particularly that pertain to the Winters District area. If I recollect, it looks like it follows the fire district boundary line. And that boundary line is at County Road 28, which runs east and west. At least it looks like from this vantage point. So they could be using some fire district boundaries as some of those maybe dividing areas.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, Shelley, do we have any other public comment?
Yes, Corinne Martinez has her hand raised.
Yes, go ahead, Corinne, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so I've only attended one of the county meetings, I've seen a number of these maps, and was on the meeting where this Concilio map was discussed, but not necessarily presented. The meeting I was on, I actually requested that the county consider another map that had been submitted that had more rural representation. And I'm disappointed to see that the county hasn't included that. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Biazzi and others that have voiced and said that I think that in terms of Winters' interests, they are much more aligned with the rest of District 5. And I would encourage the city council to, voice that in a letter, that it is about the communities of interest. It is about like needs. It is about commonalities and concerns that we have as Winters and as a rural community that has a lot of agriculture, including the Marianis, who farm a large number of acres in Winters, in addition to having a plant that processes nuts from a large number of farmers all over the county and outside of the county. I also don't know any of the legalities of this, and I've never been involved in this process before, but in the meeting that I attended, and my read of the Concilio group / map is is pretty, I don't have a very positive opinion. They seem to be attempting to strong arm the county into something threatening legal action if the county doesn't do some redistricting based on race, which I think is completely illegal. In fact, the moderator in the meeting said that they were explicitly not allowed to do that. So I wouldn't put a lot of credence in what they're doing. That's my opinion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Corinne. Shelley, do we have any others?
Any other hands raised at this time?
Okay, and no written comment?
We received no written comment.
Okay, would the council like to make any other comments regarding this? Do we want to do a letter to the county advisory committee, to the supervisors? And if so, do we have a first and second choice? Maybe the attorney could speak up as to whether or not we would need to vote on this, or what our process would be.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make sure that there's a consensus. I'm not hearing a consensus at this point. If we were to write a letter, it would be helpful if there was a majority that expressed their opinion.
Sure. Just
Okay.
wanted to see what our options are here.
Mayor Callan,
Yes.
while we're talking about this and waiting for council, do we know for sure that there aren't going to be other maps presented? Are these final now? Do we know that?
Does
I don't
anybody
know what,
that?
I don't know if the county supervisors will want to change and bring any of the other ones back. I'm not sure if that's possible, but I think that was the last meeting of the redistricting commission that met. I believe their last meeting was last night. So they make their recommendation, and then I think the supervisors have a meeting on the 9th and then another meeting later in the month to make up their minds on what they're going to do.
Okay. I asked that question because we might, pick this map here that we're looking at now, or we might pick another one. But it might be more important that we let them know what we are looking for in representation, that we want an agricultural based area, and that we're concerned about the boundaries. And it's really hard for me to look at this map and try to figure out where the division between 5 and 2 are, or 2 and 3, and know exactly what we're asking for. But that's just it. I want to be tied to the agricultural areas, but I want to make sure that it's more than just the boundaries. It's what they will provide for us and what we can get out of it. Like I do think that it's very important that we have that property to the west of us that we don't have now. So those just comments. It's with what we're given to work with. I'm a little disappointed, not for this presentation tonight, but in general. It'd be nice if the districts were on a map where you could still see the roads and you can see the freeways. That's about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think by being, if we were to recommend map 2, that puts us in with other communities of like interest, like I said earlier, like Esparto and Madison and Cape A, who have similar interests to what a community like Winters has.
I agree.
Map 2.
Can you put 2 back up, Shelley?
So this one is much closer to what we were 10 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, and it does go all the way to the west. And as somebody pointed out, I think it was Kate, all 3 of the options that you observed last night did take whatever, whether we're in 2 or 5, it took us all the way to the western border, which I think everybody agrees we should have them, because we consider everything to the western border Winters proper. Yeah, I wouldn't mind if I don't even care if we specify a numbers per se, but just emphasis on wanting to separate out from Davis and be more concentrated with the rural communities is more in line with what we feel would be best for Winters. And I think, you know, this is the closest to that. If some of these lines needed to be adjusted a little bit one way or the other to make the numbers work, then that's fine. But I think that's what they've already done is,
Mhm.
you know, making the population numbers work.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So it sounds like we have consensus from 2 council members, if I'm hearing right, the mayor and myself, and I'm not sure where the other 3 council members are on it.
If I'm looking at map 2 now in front of me, and I can now see where it's going, and we're talking about District 5. And that would be all right with me.
Okay. Councilmember Anderson, thoughts?
Sure. I would be in support of the map. It looks like it goes clear to the ridge line of the mountains there.
Yeah, goes to the county line, correct.
So to the county line and agricultural purposes, keeping in mind that, as Corinne Martinez pointed out, that the business such as a nut processor doesn't mean that they do not grow product and farm crops in the area. I don't think it should be a detriment to include farmers in the district.
Okay.
Even if they process in another district. So that's.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lauren, any thoughts?
I think that the tone of whatever it is that we decide, just we need to be really careful about our tone, not to sound like we're anti-Davis. I think that in the long run isn't the Yolo way. I don't think that I can make a statement because I'm considering running for higher office to endorse a map. But as part of council, I just want us to be careful of how we word things.
Fair enough. Okay. City attorney, do we need to vote on this, or just the fact that we have a majority lean in one direction? Is that sufficient?
Mr. Mayor, that should be sufficient. Although if you do want to make a motion to formalize the action, that is fine too as well.
Okay. But we don't need to in order to produce a letter, correct?
That is correct. You could direct
Okay.
staff to go ahead and draft a letter to the effect
Okay.
of proposing map 2.
Okay, then direction so given. All right.
And direction received. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right. Now let's move on to the state and congressional maps and see where we're at with those.
So Shelley, if you could bring up the PowerPoint again. Let's see. Is this, here we go. So this must be the Independent Commission for State and Congressional level offices. So if we could scroll to the next slide, please. So this is the current state Senate district map.
Could you help kind of show where the assembly district is? Because it's just a little bit overwhelming on my big old screen.
So this is the Senate district.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the Senate,
So-
okay.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is the Senate, and Shelley's got control of the cursor, but if you look on the right side, you will see, you'll see us.
Okay.
There we go. It's blown in.
So we have all of Napa, Yolo, and Solano. Okay,
In
thanks.
District 3. So the next
Okay.
slide, please. And it looks as if, there we go, we're right there. So the yellow is the state Senate proposed map. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's go back one. So there's one proposed map for the state Senate. Are there any comments on the state Senate map?
That's different from the map. Are these new maps from today?
It looks, Elena,
I-
let me check with Elena. I don't know if she's got audio. She was updating, she's been updating these PowerPoints. So it looks like, yes, currently released maps from 11/2.
Yeah, I believe they are the most recent. I was looking at them earlier this afternoon, and it just looks like what they had listed as of today. My comments on it, it looks like with the proposed Senate district, we're still lumped in with many of the same communities that we were in previously. Looks like it goes maybe a little bit farther to
North.
the north. It looks like, we're still in with Napa. We have Yolo, Solano, so brings part of Lake County into it, or most of Lake County, it looks like. So I don't really think that looks too bad.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with it.
Mhm.
Yeah, as far as the Senate goes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
And
so let's go to the,
wait. Okay,
let's go to the assembly. So, there we are right there.
this is the current.
This is the current. And then
Which
next
is
slide.
Yolo, Napa, and Lake counties primarily. And a
don't
little bit
think
of Colusa County.
No, that's it. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah,
This is the-
this moves us to Vallejo, Fairfield, Benicia. These communities don't have anything to do with us.
Yeah,
They're not
So this
like
is-
us. Yeah,
I
this is-
don't care for this at all. I got a comment from a public member, sent me a text earlier, said that this looks like, in this district, you could call it the gateway to Vallejo. But I'm not liking this at all, because it previously our District 4, represented by Cecilia, was more the rural counties, the rural areas, having, Napa and Lake and Yolo and part of, I think it was Colusa County, is much better representation for us than this map, for sure.
Yeah.
Mayor, yeah, I would also agree. I think this proposed map for the assembly lines, I definitely do not agree with the way they have Winters separated out away from the rest of the district we used to be a part of. I'd like to see them bring that line down to where the county line is, to maybe along there where the creek goes through, the county line between us and Solano.
Mhm.
Put us back into that other district.
I was going to suggest that also. I agree.
We
Yeah.
need to continue to be part of the Berryessa Mountain watershed. I think that we have cohesive general interests with the agriculture there, especially I think they're called like specialty farming. I think that we're more aligned with Napa. We share an aquifer with the people in Yolo, not the people in Sassoon. We have similar ag concerns. I mean, this is where, you know, I hope Corinne speaks up on this. This is an area worth fighting for. And I think we're completely in the wrong area with people who don't have any of our best interests in mind and actually nothing in common with us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is there more than one proposed assembly map or only one?
I think there's only one.
Really?
I think what they did is they updated the Senate and the congressional map to not make it go all the way to like the Oregon border. They moved it down and made it more compact, but they didn't touch the assembly district. They still kind of took the assembly district out of where it was and shifted, cut Yolo County and cut Winters out of a bunch of Yolo County and cut Napa out. This is a complete disservice, I think, to our community.
Oh yeah, we're not even in there with the Sparto and Madison. And
No.
yeah, I don't like this at all.
As far as I know, there was only one proposed map for the assembly and the Senate districts that I saw.
Well,
So
I was
if-
speaking to the update today. The Senate update of today it was a different map a few days ago. It's what I was speaking to.
And I was looking at the one that went up almost to the northern border of the state. But if they're using population as a determiner, do they, I mean, and we know what our population is. If we were added into the rest of that part in the northern section, but how much more population would we get other than what is in the city of Winters? Would we pick up a lot of population? Would that add a lot of population to that district, the Yolo district?
Pierre, could I just say, I believe that it's not just shifting the numbers, it's about communities of interest, like what Kate mentioned earlier. And I think that if we identify ourselves as an ag community, a community of interest with other ag producers, with especially products like wine, nuts, and so forth, then we need to be in a community of interest with other areas like ours. Just shifting us out for the sake of numbers doesn't respect our community of interest.
No, I agree with you, and I
Agree.
understand that, but I thought that in making these maps, they were trying to equalize population. And I mean, I don't know that there's some other group that would like to move into or move out of our area. But if they're still trying to keep the population similar, that may be why they cut it off the way they did, because it doesn't make sense that we shouldn't be with Woodland and Esparto.
Yeah.
And I can't see any other reason
give
not.
them American Canyon and we can exit.
I just want to say that if we have a similar assembly district with this Senate district, then we have a kind of parity to get stuff done in our area. We have united voices. When we get divided out, then we have different assembly members that will represent different aspects of Yolo County. We'll have, a senator for one thing that's not working with our assembly member on another thing. It just becomes really hard to have a strong, cohesive, represented area when you take you take the assembly member out of that area for Senate. I think that we need to be as close to our prior boundary levels, or at least in parity with what the Senate district is, to have that assembly district inside of that area for cohesion of our county.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Councilmember Lauren. I think having our assembly member and our Senate representative being in similar areas would be very beneficial. Good point.
Yep. Excellent point. Yeah, so I think everybody pretty much agrees on not liking this particular line for the assembly district for sure. And I think we can say we'd like to voice that opinion. But let's see if we have any public comment about the Senate or assembly maps. Shelley?
I have Chris Turkovich.
Okay. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council. And yeah, so a couple of thoughts here. It does come back to communities of interest on all levels. So I know you guys closed it up here, but on the county level, that Winters, Madison, Esparto, Cape Valley is truly our community of interest. And looking at this assembly proposal, as you back up regionally for us in Winters, it's on a county level, it's that small community of interest kind of along the west side of the valley. As we talk about assembly and more regionally, it truly becomes about like Vacaville, Davis, Woodland. Those are our communities of interest. And those are the areas that we should be concentrating on making sure are included. So it is about population, and this process is quite complicated. And I haven't given the assembly or the Senate as much time as I have the county level. But from obvious feedback at the assembly level, Davis, Woodland, Esparto, Madison, and the Cape Valley, along with Vacaville, are obvious communities of interest. And so from this map standpoint, that would be my area to focus in on. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Shelley, any other hands up for comment?
Yes, Kate Laddish.
Okay. Welcome back, Kate.
Thank you. And sorry, I'm called into the state thing, and I needed to see if they're about to call my number. All right, Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And I really appreciate that council is talking about this. And so focusing on the assembly district, well, actually, I'm taking all of them: Assembly, Senate, and Congressional. The Senate and Congressional ones are so much improved compared to what they were, but Assembly could still use some work. A lot of people from Yolo County, and then also people from Solano County, have been pretty vocal about wanting to keep Yolo County whole in the statewide redistricting, and then also have been saying that Yolo and Solano should be grouped. And because of that, we're no longer in Senate and Congressional districts that stretch to the Oregon border. And so because we're relying on that reasoning to keep us with, for example, the part of the Winters community that's just on the other side of the creek, I would actually implore council to not say that we have nothing in common with any part of Solano County, because that would kind of cut the legs out of our reasoning for why we shouldn't be with MODOC. And so, but I think the Assembly district is really highlights the importance of keeping Yolo County whole, that Winters should not be carved out of all the other incorporated cities in the county. And so I think that would be a really important thing for the city council to express. And so those are my two: is the keeping Yolo County whole, and then grouping with Solano County to the extent possible. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. Shelley, anybody else?
Corinne Martinez.
Okay. Welcome back, Corinne.
So yeah, I'll be echo some of my comments from earlier that so I think this map carving Winters out of the county, I don't think is the right thing to do. Combining, if combining Yolo and Solano compared with combining Yolo with Napa and Lake, like the Senate map does, feels to me like we have more in common along the Senate map line than we do what the current assembly line is. Although to Kate's point, we do have members of our community that, live in Solano County. And so the northern end of Solano County is an important part of this as well. So I don't know what the, sort of input process is here, but I think carving up Yolo County in this way doesn't really do Winters any service here the way that it could be. So if this council is going to, voice an opinion, it would be, I would concur that we need to, keep the county whole and figure out some way to, be better aligned with what I think is a good a Senate map.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. Shelley, anybody else?
Don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. All right, any other council comments?
I would
Thoughts on either?
Oh, Harold has his hands up.
Okay. Councilmember Anderson.
Just looking at the assembly map, that looks an awful lot like an air district map. And I wonder if that might have some bearing on things that it's worth mentioning. That's just a thought.
Okay.
Just to let you know, I want to be on record as saying I want to keep Winters in Yolo County and keep Yolo County together. So that's just another vote for that.
I agree. I think most everybody agrees on that. So,
Yes.
and I think that'd be the direction there. Okay, and I think we still have a Congressional to look at.
Yes, thank you. So this is the current congressional district. And then Shelley, if you would bring us to the next slide, please. And this is the proposed congressional district.
Can we go back again? Okay. Okay, thoughts, anybody?
I'm going to confess that I looked at the prior maps and not this map because I didn't know that this came out today while I was reading everything else. And it's hard for me to overlay it like visually in my mind with the one right before it without looking at it several times in a row. But it cuts out. We're looking at this blue section, right?
Yes.
And it cuts out Napa and part of Solano. So it's too bad we can't see all three districts kind of, all three seats at the same time.
So where it says VCD Concord, are we right under that V there?
believe
Yeah,
so.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's right on top
So
of winter.
Yep.
That's where we are. Okay.
Mhm.
I was having a little trouble finding my home.
So it moves us out of some of the other areas that we were previously in. We were in with Vacaville,
Mhm.
some other areas, and we're now separated.
So it doesn't even have that much commonality with the assembly seat or the Senate seat.
No.
Can we go up north further on the map a little bit? See how far up it goes?
The very top looks like Rumsey and Dunnigan up at the top there.
Is that
Yep.
what it is? Okay. Oh, yeah. Hmm.
It looks like it even goes down into, was that Danville down towards the bottom?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Wow.
goes all the way
Very
over to
different, very different
Brentwood.
areas than,
Yeah. Yeah, once
Brentwood.
again, they took it more down into the Bay Area with more of the Bay Area cities down there
Mhm.
and took away more of the more rural areas.
Hmm.
I'd like to see us back over into that Yolo and Lake district.
I agree.
Agreed.
Mhm.
We just have more in common with
Yeah.
Napa
Mhm.
and Lake and
Yeah.
growers and producers. Yeah.
That one
Yeah.
also does, looks like goes all the way over to the coast into Marin County. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know
it
how they
does.
came up with some of these lines. I know it wasn't an easy process, but wow. Really spread out all over the place.
Yeah, I think the way this is drawn right now, this congressional district, you might as well put a line across right above, what is that, Antioch up there, and just consider it that part of the Bay Area, because the rest of us up here, all us little peons, we're not going to mean anything to them down there. I think we definitely need to, it'd be nice if they took that part out of the bottom and, like was suggested by others, give us back part of Lake County and Napa County would be better suited for our interest, I think.
I have a question for you, Mayor Cowan. Do you think
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
our 505 project would rise to being something that would be pursued in this configuration with all the need of the Bay Area? You think we would, you think that our need for that 505 overpass would happen?
I don't.
I don't either.
I don't. I think that, we'd get, I think, like I say, the southern portion of this district here, they wouldn't even know our name.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah. So we don't like this one, Kathleen.
But we don't, if
I
the
was just going
line,
to say, I hear the consensus. Did you want to call for any public comment on the congressional district?
Yes. We'll see if there's any public comment on the congressional map. Shelley, do we have any hands up or?
Yes, Chris Turkovich.
Okay. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you. Good evening. Sorry, I forgot the first time. So Chris Turkovich, 636 Foxglove Circle. And yeah, this map is by far the worst one we've seen tonight. And again, going back to communities of interest. So we've got our ag water in our area comes from Lake County through Clear Lake. And this pulls us out of that area. Lake Berryessa, that's not in this district, which also ties into Solano County and Vacaville, Fairfield, Benicia, Vallejo water, as well as tourism and all the economic connection to Vacaville, Fairfield. So it makes a lot more sense. We have little to no connection to Orinda, Moraga, Danville, those areas, Walnut Creek. And we do have both cultural and economic connections to Vacaville, Fairfield, American Canyon, Vallejo. When you're talking congressional, as you zoom out, just as you were talking with assembly, we didn't want those areas necessarily in the assembly map, but for this conversation, it's Solano County, Napa County, and Lake County are definitely in our communities of interest on a number of levels: water, ag, economic, social, cultural, tourism. I mean, check every box. And but you do need to pick up population. So Vallejo, Benicia, American Canyon, Napa, that's where we need to be.
Yeah, if we picked up Napa County and Lake, or Lake County. Yeah. Agreed. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Shelley, anybody else?
Yes, Kate Laddish.
Okay, welcome back.
Thank you. Kate Laddish, 400 Morgan Street, number 21. And let's see, first thing before I forget is I put in the chat actually a link to interactive visualizations that you can use to toggle for Assembly, Senate, and Congressional districts. And I believe some of the handouts for this week's meetings actually also let you look at the current districts and these new ones. And the interactive visualizations let you zoom down to the street level. And so you can figure out exactly what portions of, for example, El Macero they'd carved out of an assembly district, that sort of thing. And so I mentioned that because it seems relevant to some of the discussion. In terms of the discussion of this particular congressional district, believe it or not, this is a vast improvement over the previous ones. And so, which I know when we look at it and say like, Orinda is a little hard to take on board, but in terms of what the thinking was behind this, I can actually speak to that some, is that there's over the last several weeks, there really has been an outpouring of comment particularly from Yolo County to, again, keep Yolo County whole, which this district does. And then also to point out that we have a strong linkage with Solano County, and that part of Yolo County is in the Delta. And so this is the first congressional map that actually has us looking that direction, rather than, for example, the last one that went all the way up to Oregon, and a previous one that had us swooping around Sacramento and included Alpine and Calaveras counties. I agree absolutely that we don't share a community of interest with the portion of Contra Costa County that's like the Orinda, Lafayette, the La Miranda portion of Contra Costa County. I think they'd be better represented. We don't share the communities of interest. I think in my most recent letter to the State Commission, I've expressed the shared community of interest with part of Napa County, because as Council has discussed in the past, management decisions about Lake Berryessa end up actually impacting our economy. And so I think that's a very firm leg that Council could stand on to express why we should be grouped with part of Napa rather than part of Contra Costa. I think we certainly share a lot with Vacaville, and so I would say if more of Solano County, more of Napa, and Lake, I think that would make a lot of sense. Again, this is a huge improvement, and it keeps Yolo County whole. But I think that Council's input could help shape this in into a better direction still.
Hey, thank you, Kate. Shelley, anybody else?
Did Joanna want to say something? I believe she may have her hands up.
That's what I said,
Oh.
city attorney.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you, Shelley.
Why
Yes.
this isn't working?
Mr. Mayor, I also just
Yes.
wanted to mention that there's also the option of either you or another council member also being involved in the drafting of the letter or taking the lead on the drafting of the letter as an alternative or with staff as well, or having staff draft the letter. I just wanted to present all options.
Okay, all right, thank you. Shelley, was there any other commenters?
I have no other hands raised at this
Okay.
time.
Well, I definitely, I think everybody pretty much agrees that at the very least, we should have the Lake Berryessa area within our district and part of Lake County as well. I agree with Kate and Chris on that, and maybe a bit more of Solano County makes up for some of the population part that we'd lose when we hack off Contra Costa, which I don't think anybody feels we need in our congressional district. So I think everybody's pretty much in concurrence on this one.
I believe you're right.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Sounds like we're all on the same page on this one. All right. I think that pretty much takes care of all these maps, correct?
Yes, thank you very much. There are no further maps.
Okay. And we're going to move on to item B, which is Council Code of Conduct.
I'm sorry, I think Councilmember Lauren, did you happen to have your hand up?
Yes,
Oh.
I did.
Oh,
I
I'm
just,
sorry.
that's okay. I think I just have a bigger screen so I could see everybody. I was just wondering if you wanted anybody to help write any of the letters, or if we're just depending on staff to write them, as Joanna brought up.
Good question. Kathleen, how do you feel about that?
It's whatever the council would desire. If the mayor would like to appoint an ad hoc to help draft the letters, that's fine. Or I can draft them for the mayor's signature and we can bench them at the next council meeting. Whichever you prefer, or whichever the council members prefer.
Go ahead.
I think that because this is so fluid and it's so weighty, that we can't wait to bench them for a council meeting. The letters have to be written and have to be sent out.
No, that's what I
maybe
meant, that the mayor would sign them and then we would bench the signed letters that were distributed at the next council meeting.
Okay, sorry, misunderstood.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I think just as long as we get it out quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I think they need to go out right away. Is it, because we can, we can spend a little bit of time and review them once they're written, correct?
Sure, I'll draft them and I can send them. If you'd like to have two council members involved in reviewing the drafts, I can send those drafts out to the two council members. And then once the two have confirmed, we'll have the mayor sign, distribute them, and then for the next packet, include the final letters that were distributed as part of the packet. So everybody's aware of what we sent out.
Okay. Send the drafts. Go ahead.
Would that mean that they wouldn't be sent in until after our next city council meeting?
No, well, I'm sorry. So we'll send them as soon as they're signed. We'll prepare them and send them as soon as they're signed. But as an information item, we will make sure to include the signed letters that have been distributed already in the council packet so that the council and the community can see the communication that was sent from the city of Winters.
Thank you for that explanation.
Okay. If there's no objections, then what I'd like to do is have Bill and Jesse review the staff written letters prior to me signing them.
Agreed.
Sure thing, boss.
Okay, there we go. Put that one to bed. Moving on. Council Code of Conduct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and the public. I'd like to recognize our Assistant City Attorney, Joanna Jin, for helping to prepare the council code of conduct. We've also referred to these as council norms. It is not unusual for city councils to adopt codes of conduct or council norms in order to cultivate a culture of respectful relationships between the council members individually, between council and staff, and between council and even the community. And so a code of conduct helps facilitate and reinforce those values and norms, and they often serve as a framework for decorum that promote an environment for effective governance. So what we have done is we've prepared the attached code of conduct. It promotes norms and values that, hold on, I'm losing my space here with my computer, that I think are already representative of the current council's commitment to each other and commitment to the community. We also have built in a few things that are already requirements that you would find in conflict of interest codes, but they're important to be able, they're important enough that they've been pulled out of the conflict of interest codes and also put into the code of conduct. We have added a couple procedural items. So for example, and you all have been testing it out, if a council member would like to see staff work on a project to ensure that level of effort is in accordance with the council majority or the will of the council, the council norms indicate that 3 council members should concur before that assignment is given to the staff to bring back at a later date. And you all have been doing that already. I think these norms are really important because it helps create an environment of mutual respect, of honesty and openness and transparency. And that is an environment that becomes critically important when we talk about good governance, not just for the dialogue among the council, but also in terms of how the council interacts with the staff and how the council interacts with the community. And so we've drafted these for council's consideration. They're presented tonight in a format that would have council members sign them upon adoption, sign them upon election or re-election to the council. But that could be, that's really up to the city council if they want those to be, council members to sign those every time, or they could be incorporated into a larger procedural manual or handbook that we could slowly build as we bring council policies forward. I did include at the end of the staff report a few other items related to council operations that should the council be interested in discussing further at a later meeting, we could certainly do that work and bring that forward for the city council. For example, at a previous meeting, there was a suggestion that the council consider evaluating whether or not the council stipend be adjusted. If that were the interest of the city council and 3 council members were to concur with that suggestion, we would bring that back at a future meeting. Another thought about council operations relates to consolidating the council election with a general election in November as opposed to the spring. Currently, it alternates March or June, depending on when the primary is. So again, if there were some interest on the part of council in discussing consolidating with the November election, we could bring that back. And then finally, one of the things that staff has also been working on relates to the number of committees and commissions and council appointments to various regional bodies. We've been compiling that information so that we can bring it back to the city council in December in accordance with the MATI Act. And the number of appointments is surprisingly large. And so again, as we talk about council operations and the commitment that the council members make individually as a council member to participate in a wide array of committees and commissions, that too is something that staff will be bringing back in December anyway, but it's also an opportunity to discuss what council members are appointed to, and in particular, the liaison function to the various working committees and commissions that the city has. So that's a very brief overview of the code of conduct. It's attached to the staff report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify anything if you'd like.
Okay, thank you very much. Council comments, thoughts? Councilmember Lauren.
Hey, I am just so pleased with this work, Joanna, Jen. Wow. It's really comprehensive. I think it's a great thing to have a group like ours. You know, we've been together 5 years already, to memorialize the way that we work together, the way that we get things done. And I think this is a document that memorializes and will allow it to be a guidepost for the future. So I know that there's a bunch of other questions, but as far as the what has brought forward in this document, I support it, and I support signing it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to thank the city manager and the city attorney for pulling this information together into this document. As was mentioned earlier, I think these are all things that I believe our current council adheres to already, and having them in writing is good. We don't know what a future council will look like when we have if there's a lot of new people that come in, but just having this in writing. So if someone is considering running for council, we can, I think this would be a good start to a handbook for council members. A lot of these things that are in here, we are required to do, like was stated about the code of ethics, the state codes that we have to adhere by for the various trainings that we do. And I think having all that into a handbook would be very beneficial to someone who might be considering running for council in the future. So I like having this in writing. I like the idea of having, once it's adopted, that we put it out there for each council member to sign, or when new council members come on board, that they would sign it and say, yes, this is why I will conduct business as a city council member for the city of Winters. I like it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, I have a hard time with the concept of signing your code of conduct. It's one thing to have one, and then to say you have to sign it. I don't see the need for that at all.
Okay. All right. Councilmember New, thoughts?
I'm just all for having the code of conduct and the having it all written out in one place. I think is a great idea. Signing it or not signing it, I wouldn't get in an argument with it. I have no problem with signing it, but you can sign it and not adhere to it, and that's not good. So I think the thing is to have it and to adhere to what is written is what is best for all of us. And I don't see that our present council would have any trouble with that at all. But it is good to have things for the councils to come.
All right, thank you. I'll add that I agree. I think I really like what staff has done with this, Joanna and Kathleen. I like the fact it's simple and it's concise. You know, it's 3.5 pages. It's not pages and pages of legal speak. It's very simple. It's very easy to understand, but it hits all the bases that we really need to hit about how we're supposed to behave. So I think it's well done. I don't mind signing it one bit. I think it's simply just an acknowledgement that you've read it and you understand it. And I personally, I don't have a problem with that. I think we talked about this at our council goal setting workshop, is where, you know, we first started talking about, you know, we should have this. And I think Councilmember Lauren, I believe you had somebody at one of your other committees that spoke about this from another jurisdiction. And you told me they were going to be speaking, and I jumped on the Zoom, and I think this is very similar in form as to what this other jurisdiction, you may remember who it was, had done. And I liked it a lot, and I like this a lot. I think this is well done, and I look forward to moving this forward personally. So thank you. Councilmember Warren.
Sure. It was Sean Robb, who's now city manager of, I believe Lincoln was city manager of Colma. And he created it for Colma. And it was shared during Sac Valley region for League of California Cities whole meeting. And there was also a presentation by the Institute for Local Government.
Yeah. Thank you. That was real helpful with this whole process. Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
Yeah, just a question, I think probably for the city attorney. So what would we do as far as, say we got a rogue council member out there that came on, wasn't adhering to these properties? What could we do?
Well, I think it would be a good opportunity to point, if you decided to have each member sign, to point that this is the council norms and code of conduct that the council member had signed and agreed to, and that you could hold them accountable to that. And just as a friendly reminder, hey, everybody has signed this. I think that would be very helpful. So in that way, the signature portion may be beneficial if you feel the need for it, but there's also the other side to that, which is you could have it just as it's at your discretion.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lauren, you're on mute.
I just had a question. Thanks on the. I very much support the idea that if we're going to move something forward, that we get a majority, 3 to bring something forward. But I was just wondering, does that have to be created by resolution, or the adoption of this document will be enough?
This is fine. It is general practice to have a consensus in order to provide staff direction, for example. And so this document just memorializes that practice.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there aren't any other council comments right now, we'll open it up for public comment. Shelley, do we have any hands raised or anybody that wishes to speak to this item? You're muted.
You're muted, Shelley.
Okay,
There you go.
so I see no raised hands at this point. So I don't see anybody waving at me from the screen.
Okay. All right. Then if there's no further discussion, I think that with this one, we should probably have a motion and a vote to adopt the council code of conduct. Councilmember Lauren.
I'm happy to move the item as stated, including the signing of the document. But I just had a procedural question. There were some other discussion points in the staff letter, and I was wondering if we could talk about some of those points after the vote.
I would hope so.
Okay.
Is that okay, Joanne?
Yes, although if that is an issue, which you could have the motion and the second and then have the conversation first before you actually do roll call.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion.
Motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Lauren and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Biazzi. I think let's go ahead and vote on this. This is the code of conduct, and then we'll discuss the other items that were brought up in the staff report. So if that's okay with everybody, Shelley, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Anderson,
No,
Councilmember Lauren,
Aye.
Councilmember New,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Biazzi,
Aye.
Mayor Cowan.
Aye, motion carries 4-1. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again, Joanne and Kathleen, for your work on this. All right, last up tonight then is to see if we want to have a little discussion about the other three items that were mentioned by the city manager, moving the election to coincide with the November election rather than skipping around in March and June. And then also the possibility of changing our stipend, and then a discussion about our appointments. So anybody like to start this one off?
Sure. Oh, there's Pierre's hands up.
Okay, Pierre, Councilmember New, go ahead. You can be first.
All right, I just want to, I think I'd like to put off the discussion of the stipend until after we go through and see what it is that Kathleen has come up with for all the extra duties that we might have, and then might consider that. But other than that, I'm open to whatever else goes on. Suggestion.
Okay, Councilmember Lauren.
Thank you for your comments, Pierre. I would like to see if we could discuss consolidating council elections with the general election in November rather than alternating March and June as like a single topic. And I support moving it because I just think more people turn out for the general. Oh, I can't discuss it. I'm sorry. I just discuss it. I would just say I support it.
Okay, well, we can kind of take these one at a time. So is there concurrence amongst the council to have further discussion about moving the election?
I support it. If I can't say anything more, that's it.
I think I would support the conversation as well. I see the Mayor Pro Tem nodding yes. So Harold, any thoughts on moving the election?
yeah. Moving the election, in my mind, would not make things more more
So, Mr. Mayor, can I pop in for a moment since we're
Yes.
not discussing the merits of moving the election? We're only
Right.
discussing whether or not we bring it back. I think I heard 3 council members concur that they'd
Yep.
like to be able to have the conversation. So I can work with the assistant city attorney and we can bring that back at a future meeting. And we would need to do that sooner, I think, rather than later, since the next election cycle begins in January.
Okay, all right, that's fair enough. And then on the appointments, I think we'd all like, you know, at least I'll say I'd like to see us take a closer look at all that. I see some other heads nodding. Councilmember New, I think Councilmember Lauren, Mayor Pro Tem. So
Yes.
I think, yeah, we'd like to have that discussion as well at a future time. And then that just leaves the stipend. I kind of think, you know, I think that's worthy of a conversation too. That's something that hasn't been adjusted or dealt with for, I think, decades. So I think you probably have concurrence on all these items from at least three of us to have further discussion on them.
What we'll try to do then is bring them all back at the same agenda if possible. So since they all relate to council operations. So I'll talk to the assistant city attorney about trying to bring them back in December at the same meeting.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. With that said, then we're on to the city manager's report.
Yes, thank you very much. And I know we are running a little late this evening, but I did want to make a couple comments. First, I'd like to publicly recognize the effort that went into getting another tractor donated for the Puda Creek Bridge. I'm thrilled to see it out there. It was a personal mission on the part of Charlie Wallace. Public Works helped move it. And most importantly, Ralph and Josie Cuberos donated the tractor. So I'd like to be able to recognize them publicly for their donation. I know we're a little delayed in bringing the Climate Action Commission back. I wrote the report today, and so it'll be on the agenda for November 16th for those of you who are waiting for the Climate Action Commission. And then finally on Friday, I have a meeting with Domas to discuss the architectural plans for the senior center. So we're hoping to make some progress on that front, and Yolo County Housing and our Administrative Services Director have worked very hard to dig through the project files to understand the accounting and what's already been paid for related to that project. So I hope to be able to have more information after my meeting on Friday with Domas. And that is my report for the evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If nobody has anything else, we'll close the meeting at 8:51. Good night, everybody.
Good night. And I think the staff will stay on so we can do a test of the Granicus Zoom integration. So Shelley and I will stay on. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Night.
Good night.
Right.
Good night. Looks like we have a couple more people on. Rick, are you logging off? There we go. All right. So Shelley, your where your mic is on your new earbuds, I think it's down so low we can't hear you. I don't know if it slides up at all, but it was very, very faint.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I'm hoping it slides.
Nope, it doesn't. It's stuck right here.
And then Elena, doesn't sound like you've got audio at the back desk there. But it looks like you guys have figured out the 30-second delay because I can see myself on the screen.
Mm-hmm. So I ended up upstairs because minus things like cool. I it up upstairs because every time I went into Zoom on the clerk computer, Zoom froze. So I'm not sure. It sounds like they might have gotten that fixed now.
Yeah, we can't hear you guys in the chamber. And my earbuds are dying, so I'm recharging one at a time now. So City of Winters is muted right now.
Yeah. Let me unmute him.
I see Taylor running. Is that Taylor?
I think it is.
Well, that meeting went longer than I anticipated.
So, yeah.
Which one are you in, Z or the other one?
Oh, I can hardly hear Shelley and I can hardly hear Taylor.
Hardly hear Taylor.
Yeah, your audio, it's the same, must have been the same thing that happened when I was there the first time we tried this.
Hardly hear. So we would need to turn it up in Zoom.
Oh,
Oh, wait, that was better.
You can hear me now? Or you give me a
Little
thumbs up
bit
if you can
better.
hear me okay?
It's still
Okay, if
faint,
you can
but
hear
it's
me
better.
okay. But there is no feedback, and that's good. That's what we want. Z is for people who are on Zoom talking to us. So they shouldn't. That's good. Because if the public is addressing Zoom, is it on Z right now? It's not on Z right now.
Oh, you know what? Let me stop recording, guys. Hold on a second.
Oh, thank you.